the things that I'm helping with are one, just raising our broad international profile of the firm, the brand, the people, the technology, the capability and the expertise. We are, as part of that, rolling out what we call a global key account program, which in many respects you yourselves are fundamentally part of, being explorers and ambassadors going out around the world to advocate the firm. And as part of that, we think about origination and sales very much as a integrated effort of client engagement with three legs. So obviously you'll all know the lead gen team and the activity that the lead gen team do, which is very, very important. Then complementing that, we've got the business development guys, and then complementing that, we've got the strategic coverage, where each member of the executive team will be responsible for developing the strategic relationship with a particular client. And as part of that role, so myself, Jerry Buggy, Pat, Mark Sykes, John Robson in New York have taken ownership of some of the large multinational banks, as an example, that we speak to, and are developing C-suite type relationships. And as part of that, we identify what the strategy should be with the client, who we speak to, why we speak to them. For people who we don't know, who we should know, and we're evolving the relationship on that basis. But again, very integrated with business development and lead gen. So I think the roles that you yourselves are going to do are very important, because, as I say, you're often going to be the first point of contact with new clients, particularly as we push into the non-financial verticals, and you're ambassadors in many respects. And it's a hard job, right? It's a hard job, it's an important job, but I think a big part of it is that you're organised, you're prepared, you take the time to understand the client, and that the process that you go through from the original connectivity, or even the idea that you have. So maybe you'll look at a marketplace and you segment it, and there's a target that you want to approach. You will do some preparation for that, and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of public information when you're researching each of the clients, and we can talk through some of those things. So you'll be segmenting, targeting, preparing. You make the first contact with the client, and that contact, of course, could be the phone call, it could be a conference, it could be accidental, because sometimes you find that you accidentally bump into people and it can lead to some very interesting business conversations. But first and foremost, it's important that you have content as part of the relationship, because clients want the knowledge, the expertise, and the professional engagement that you can bring. So the relationship and the personality is part of it, but it's very, very important that you bring a high degree of professionalism and content to the conversation. If you have any questions about selling, originating, coverage, anything you want to know, or this will be important for the clients, of course, right? Because you've got to ask lots of questions, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about figuring out whether they're going to be a legitimate opportunity to purchase, or if they're just going to be, like Pat said, tire kickers?
Yes.
What's your approach to evaluating that?
Yes. So it can be hard to identify that straight off, okay? And again, I think there's a difference between a product sale and a consultative type sale, okay? So from a pure product perspective, you could take a view that we're in the marketplace to sell software, okay? And our software is relevant for specific client needs in sectors where they've got large volumes and velocity of data, and they may use current software solutions that either are or are not fit for purpose. But I think if you do the initial work around the sector that the client is in, the company, you get a sense of their use cases, and then you can identify the people within the organisation who have the buying power around that particular tech stack or software, then that will give you at least an idea that there's a potential application for the technology within the sector and within that particular company. And then I think it does take a few iterations of your conversations with the clients to identify, is someone, in Pat's words, a tire kicker or not. I mean, I personally think it's a slightly different origination process than selling cars or baked beans. That it is a technical selling process in many respects. So the more research that you do and the closer you get to that particular client, then as the conversation evolves, I think that if you've initial connectivity, say for instance you meet somebody at a conference and they hold themselves out to be head of data analytics for Airbus, right? We'll use Airbus as an example, as an account that we broke into, and Kevin McGivern's done a great job with that. So say for instance you meet someone like that, you'll know from your own research and from the conversation whether our technology stack is applicable to what their needs are. Okay, you'll potentially have a follow-up conversation or presentation to the client from the initial contact that you had with them, and a good signal as to whether they're serious or not is either one, how engaged they are when you do the face-to-face technical presentation or introduction to FD/KX, and or how many of their colleagues they bring to the meeting, right? Because if a client is always engaging directly with you one-on-one, they may not be that serious, but if they engage other colleagues that they have who are professionally involved in certain aspects of whatever the need is, then you'll know that it's a much more serious conversation, because if they're prepared to take an hour or an hour and a half out of 3 or 4 executives' time, then you know that it's potentially real, as opposed to the same person wanting to meet you for coffee, or you take them for lunch and they're like hanging out with you. You know that they're likely not to be that serious from a professional perspective. So that would be one response for you. Okay.
Thanks.
Jim, how do you see us overcoming kind of brand recognition issue we have when we come up against some of the bigger players?
Yes. So what's interesting is that people who've been around the block a few times in business will know that large, well-established brands sometimes can be a little bit complacent, and they will also recognize that from a technology perspective, smaller brands or smaller companies can be more innovative, they can be more nimble, and they can be more creative just around the solutions that they would give to clients. So I think a good response to someone if they say that to you, if someone's first obstacle to you is, "Oh, you're a small company and I don't take you seriously," you can say, "Well, I hear what you're saying, but bear in mind that in the technology world, often the most creative and innovative organizations are slightly smaller, and the reason they're innovative is because of that they're open to new ideas. So it's at least worth your while speaking to us for one initial meeting." Right? So yeah.
Jim, this was something that sort of came up in around the applied materials deal. So obviously you'll get a lot of people who, if they're taking a chance on us, it might be a career sort of ending decision possibly. Would you be able to offer any advice as to how to sort of get around that obstacle, or in terms of how would you approach someone who has that, that this could actually end my career and taking a risk in a smaller company? Or
Yes. So before a client would get to that point where they take a career risking decision to give someone like ourselves a new piece of business, or for them to apply a new technology, they're going to go through a significant amount of their own research, due diligence on us, due diligence on the technology, due diligence on the robustness of the technology for whatever they want to use it for. So they will go through a process. So again, if you sense that someone has that anxiety, then from a empathy perspective and putting yourself in their position. You know, you can say to them, look, I can understand that this is a big decision for you, for the organisation. It's potentially a change of direction, and that you would appreciate that before they got to the point of making that decision, that they would want to be absolutely comfortable with our technology solution, the robustness of it and the application, and therefore you would like to help them make the journey as comfortable within their own framework that they have to work with as possible, and you would like to engage with them as a partner to do that. You know, so there's types of positioning and language and almost a subtleness and softness in your approach that you can build the confidence of the people. Because I think having been on the receiving end of people selling to myself, things that turn me off are, you know, people who are really aggressive and very hard sell, but those people who display an understanding of what I need, the framework and the restrictions that I have to work with internally, then you've a more you've a higher probability of engaging with someone who's seen as being consensual and collaborative as someone who's just a hard sell product person.
Jim, how long do you think it will take for our presence in the new markets to outgrow our presence in the financial markets? Or do you think we ever will?
It's a good question. I think if you consider the evolution of the firm, right? So the firm was established in '96, listed on AIM in '02. So from '96 to now, what's that? 21 years. And the I suppose the closest indication would be if you look at how quickly the MarTech business, MRP and the application of technology within MarTech has grown. I mean, that's grown particularly quickly over the past 5 years. Could I answer with 100% confidence how quickly we'll develop in the non-financial sector? I'm not sure, but clearly there's a big prize. And if you look at the Fortune 500 company that you mentioned, the lead time, I think, for the origination of that piece of business was 18 months to 2 years, So I think that's a good example of how long it can take to land an opportunity like that. But typically there's a tipping point that once you get one or two, you'll get a J curve, it'll happen very, very quickly. 5 years, would that be? Yeah, maybe we'll have a look back in 5 years and hopefully the IoT and non-financial businesses have grown the financial market piece.
Thank you.
Jim, how would you suggest us to distribute our time, especially at the very beginning once we are in a new city? So would you spend more time doing research or attending events, or how would you recommend, what you recommend us to do in that sense?
Okay, so I would say that, which you're already partly doing from my conversations with Shane, I think that if you go to a new marketplace, right, you will have spent a significant amount of time thinking about the marketplace, the different sectors, the different companies, and presumably you will have already done a lot of research on some of the individual companies that you might want to target. So I would say initially probably anything up to 30% of your time would be spent thinking, researching, planning, and being thoughtful about who you're going to approach and why. That's very, very important, because I think sometimes if you just jump in, you need to have a plan, right? You need to have a plan. So say about 30% on the preparation, the research, etc. Then the connectivity that you get in that marketplace, so when you start attending conferences, events, and then sort of making calls and introductions around that, I would say that the sort of outreach, outreach to the clients, the networking that you would do, and the getting connected in the local marketplace could be another 30% of your time. Okay. Then I would say that, once you've done a lot of your thinking, prep, connectivity, attending events, you then start to develop a view of all of the people that you're meeting and interacting with. Maybe you'll have, 4 or 5 meaningful conversations, 4 or 5 meaningful meetings with people where, you will be preparing pitch books and presentations. You'll have a meeting, there will be follow-up, and then that leads to, many threads of conversation. But I typically find that, for every hour's meeting that you have, you could do anything up to 3 to 4 hours preparation, and that preparation could be the research that you're doing on the client, on the company, thinking about the actual meeting that you're going to attend, preparation of your marketing material, and thinking about what you're going to say, and then you get the meeting and all of that preparation comes together. So as an example, I'm in Newry now, but I'm going up to Belfast for a meeting at 2 o'clock, and an example of that is that we have a relationship with Capita in Ireland, and we've also developed a relationship with Capita Group in London with some of the people who sit on top of all of their different subsidiaries looking for synergies, opportunities, partnerships, etc. And they've introduced us to one of their subsidiaries called AMT Cybex, and AMT Cybex are a data analytics business for the utility sector, and there seems to be some complementary activity to what we would do from a smart metering perspective. You may have heard of the ISO work that we do in the US. So Kevin McGivern, myself and Andrew Wilson are going to meet them at 2 o'clock. This is a live example of that, right? So I've had an engagement with the London people for probably 6 months now. We've got an existing relationship in Ireland. The thread of the conversation has gone down 3 separate routes, one of which is the utility analytics piece. So the people that we're meeting this afternoon, I was introduced to them by their London colleagues. I had a preliminary telephone call about 4 weeks ago with one of the guys that we're meeting today, and we agreed that we would have a follow-up where we would go and introduce them to FD more broadly, and then specifically within the KX technology side, give them a sense of the sort of technical architecture of KX, discuss some of the use cases broadly, and then use cases within the utility sector, and then they would tell us a little bit about them, right? And then after this meeting, we'll have another follow-up which will lead to another conversation. So you'll find that for a given meeting, the preparation that you do is very, very important, right? So if we take, and we've gone a little bit tangentially off piece, but so this particular presentation, so some of it is obvious, because when you go to meet people, you want to tell them who you are, what you do, how you do it, how good you are at it, and then you want to listen to them and understand what they do, right? So if you can get a lot of those basics right, as long as your content is there, then that's very important, right? So in the first section is introducing the First Derivatives Group. And again, it doesn't need to be overkill, it doesn't need to be super technical. Clear, concise, well thought through communication is very important. So particularly for yourselves, when you're going to locations where people may never have heard of FD, sectors who may not have heard of us, or sectors who've never used the technology before. Just getting the basics right are very, very important. And you don't need to be anything other than yourselves, right? You know, and that's very important, right? So this gives a very clear overview that, you know, we're a group of 1,700 people plus, with 2 divisions, capital markets, consulting and software. We're AIM listed, a certain market cap. We're active in various marketplaces, and we've got a global presence, right? So that's kind of a elevator pitch, right? So the next piece is really just building a storyboard around who we are and who we've evolved, or how we've evolved. You know, so you can see that we've articulated to them that over the past 20 years we've grown into a integrated services and software company, and that we've got 3 strands of our strategy and client focus at the moment. One is narrower and deeper with existing clients. 2 is continuing to invest in our technology stack. And 3, what you're part of is selective moves into other verticals where the technology is relevant, right? So you're a living embodiment of number 3, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. Just give them a sense of the breadth of our client landscape across, you know, financial market participants, exchanges, regulators, and industrial corporates. A little bit of a detail on the technology itself, what it is, what it does. A little bit of a discussion how you build the whole KX story up from the core technology, an architectural and management layer, visualization and discovery layer, then how we focused initially on financial sector, and now how we're moving into retail, energy, utilities, telecoms, aerospace, pharma, etc. And you probably find with a lot of these slides that we use, the slides are really only a tool to help you steer the conversation and help you to plant some kernels of ideas in the client's mind, so they start to connect with you and recognize, well, actually, I can see how what you're talking to me about you and your technology may be relevant to what I do, right? And then we build up to being much more specifically relevant to what the client's particular circumstances are. So if you look at page 11, we've spoken about a range of use cases outside of finance for the technology. So we talk about pharma, we talked about the Earlham Institute, which was the National Genome Research Centre, the electricity grid and market operator, which for these particular clients will be very relevant. And then we spoke a little bit about the aerospace work that we're doing in geospatial. So again, for you yourselves, depending on the client that you speak to, you can tweak the conversation to suit your own agenda, but also you can keep it open enough that if the conversation starts to open up different threads, then you can bring the conversation whatever way you want. And it probably addresses part of your point, you know, that this will help you flush out who's interested and who's not interested, and who's kicking the tires and who's not. But I think in that initial meeting, I wouldn't worry about trying to identify people who are kicking tires. You just want to make the contact and start to get the connectivity going and the relationship going with the client. I think the tire kicking thing is something for later down the line. So we're going to do a little bit of a detailed case review of ISO, given the use cases particularly relevant to them. So again, we talk a little bit about that, and then as part of this point I made to you about understanding your client, page 15 is an extract from some presentations that the client themselves gave and some of the material on their website. So as you know, client websites are often a fantastic source of information. So this talks about what they're selling to the marketplace. So the hook that we want to try to develop, or the thread we want to try to develop, is that this is your product offering to your clients. Then what are the technologies that you use behind that to support your marketing efforts with your client, with your services and solutions, and then therefore, how do we think that KX could be relevant to what you're doing, right? Okay, so that was a very long-winded answer, Jessica, to your
No, but it
question
makes
about
sense,
the
because-
time, yeah.
Especially like I imagine ourselves making presentations to clients, and we are now doing some presentations internally, but it's mainly focused on KX as a technology.
Yes,
But this is more useful for us because we need to learn about the technology. But I think once you go outside and you need to talk to a client, rather than talking about actually what KX is
Yes.
in detail,
yes,
maybe it would be good to actually show them, I know what's your problem, this is your problem, and
Yeah.
maybe this is how we can help you. Maybe rather than actually talking about Q programming language and, you know, how the architect. Also because I assume most of us don't really have enough knowledge and technical expertise to actually handle a very technical presentation, and that is maybe one of my biggest fear, like concerns, not like the fact that I'm not technical enough, that maybe someone flag me some questions that I'm not sure how to answer, you know.
well, you'll find, depending on the audience, as long as you're honest with the client, so as long as you don't hold yourself out to be the technical expert, the client will be rich with their forgiveness, right? You know, so as long as you're presenting yourself as the marketer or the originator or the relationship person, the client won't judge you harshly for not having the detailed technical knowledge that a systems architect or engineer would have, because they will know that as part of your infrastructure as a business, that you will have people who are relationship client focused and who want to understand the client's perspective. They'll know that you'll have very technical engineering technology people who you can then bring in for follow-up conversations. So don't be too anxious about that at all. That would be well understood in the marketplace. But again, the key is that you clearly articulate what part of the firm that you're representing. And if you're representing yourself as an ambassador, a business development, origination type person, then that will be fine. You know, I think as long as you have a sufficient understanding of broadly what the technology is, what it does, what the use cases are, and what the potential application is for the client in their specific sector, that's fine. How are we going? Is it going all right? Okay. So I think, yeah, we'd said, so 30% prep, planning, thinking, 30% outreach, connectivity, etc. You probably related to that, it's then 20% of the actual time face to face with the client, and then 20% follow up associated with those meetings, etc. And also, I would say to you, given that you're all going to be very dispersed globally, it's very important to stay connected. You know, so that's important professionally, it's important personally, it's important emotionally. You want to stay connected. You know?